You are now listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
Groovy. No more room in hell. The dead will walk here.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Great Scott, boy!
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me today will be Derek.
Hello.
And Sean. Stop touching your mic, Derek.
Hello.
I wanted to touch the mic.
You were touching, I could hear it.
No touching.
Oh, no touching. No touching.
All right,
shirt's
so
stuck. Okay.
on this episode, we'll be discussing Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, the comedy horror film from 2010. But before we get to that, we'll just briefly go through some of the remaining horror films that are coming out in 2016 to
And I think
theaters.
you should note when we're recording this.
Yeah, so
Same day.
we're
That's why
recording
we're
this
waiting.
the same day as the prior episode of the podcast, which is why we're not covering any news or things we've been watching, just
And
because
just in case,
vacations, what have you.
And if anyone new is tuning in, that's why we're wearing the same clothes. We don't wear the same
We're
clothes.
recording
all the
this
time.
on July 30th.
Yeah, so if
and
you're
this
watching
should-
the video version, we will be wearing the same outfits for 2 consecutive episodes because we record them back to back.
And this will be, the August 9th podcast, I believe, even though. So,
Yeah, so
Yeah,
this will be coming
projecting
out.
into the future.
so we thought we would cover kind of what we have to look forward to in horror for the rest of the year.
Or what is coming out.
Yeah,
not so much.
what's coming out. We can kind of talk about some of what we think will be our personal highlights. But there's been quite a few horror films, and there's quite a few more to go too. Of course, considering it's.
I feel like
Halloween.
there's more to come out than that already has been released.
And by the time this podcast has been released, we will be millionaires.
I wish
For some reason, I don't know.
What?
I don't know. But just some fortuitous event will happen to somebody
And
between
this will be the
now
final podcast because then we'll just say screw it.
and then we will hire some professionals to come in and we'll hire people to act as us in the podcast.
Yeah, we'll write the script.
How about we make
So-
Corey and Arnie do the podcast? Just pay them to do it.
But so before we get into discussing Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, we'll go through some of the movies that are coming out in the remainder of this year. So kind of going through the list. So we are recording this on July 30th.
And we made this list in 30 seconds,
yeah.
just a few minutes ago.
This is
'Cause we're
also
like, what else can we talk about
at
since
noon
it's late?
45.
Yeah,
if you care about what time it is.
So so some of the movies that are coming out throughout the remainder of the year, because a lot of stuff's already come out to this point. Lights Out was the most recent large release. So movies that are coming out soon. So Viral was supposed to have come out yesterday, which is something I haven't really heard too much about. And it seems like you
And-
can rent it on the video on demand services already.
Also, the name alone makes me not want to watch it. So naming movies better.
Well, VHS Viral was the worst of that series.
I think this has to do with maybe a virus happening and two people in a house deciding, I think, if they're going to stay in there or help. I don't know.
See, here's the thing.
Yeah.
I don't care about
The poster
virus
looks
movies.
cool.
Yeah, I'm just one of those people. It's like Cuba Gooding Jr. and dude from The Graduate made that movie about a virus. I just
Dustin
don't care.
Hoffman?
Yeah, and I just monkeys kill people, whatever. Quarantine? No, not quarantine.
Outbreak.
Outbreak. Yeah. After that, I was just like,
was cool.
don't try to get me to watch a virus movie. It's not going to watch it.
Let's see. So the next movie that I think we're all actually pretty highly anticipating.
And I obviously have been William pointing out that I call it the wrong name all the time.
is Don't Breathe, which is a new movie from director Fede Alvarez, who did the 2013 Evil Dead reboot remake.
Looking very.
Did this premiere at
very-
South by Southwest?
Yes, I believe so.
And then the reviews for it, they were very positive, but they weren't like, oh man, this is the second coming. There were some criticisms of it, even in the positive reviews from what I remember. What about you, William?
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think that it's the reviews were pretty much that it's like for a general non-horror genre fan and audience, it's a good movie that people generally have seemed to have enjoyed. It's not like a setting the world on fire Oscar nominated movie. It's just a very solid movie, more in the mold of a Hitchcockian type suspense story than paranormal ghost crap.
Yeah, because we've all really been looking forward to it. And basically, my point was that even though we're super looking forward to this isn't going to be a definite the best horror film of the year. You know what I mean? We don't know yet.
Yeah, but
we don't know yet.
I would thought going into Cities 3 last year that I would have not been that impressed with it. And
Yeah.
Then it was
Well,
my
it seems
favorite
like
of the year.
the reviews seem it could be a similar movie to 10 Cloverfield Lane in that it's not really like a horror film.
So Roseanne meets ending world stuff.
You haven't even seen that movie.
Yeah,
Derek.
I don't want to. I've already
It's
seen.
good.
I've already watched Roseanne, William. I don't
pretty
want to go
good.
back and watch it.
The fact that John Goodman is in a movie does not make it Roseanne.
It does make it Roseanne.
So
He
is Oh
Roseanne.
Brother, Where Art Thou, Roseanne?
Yes.
Big Lebowski.
Yes.
Raising Arizona?
Yes. Anything that John Goodman is can be tied back to Roseanne.
You're out of your depth, Derek.
No, I'm all right on this. John Goodman
You're out
plays
of your
his
depth.
character from Roseanne every movie he's
All
ever
right,
been
so
in.
after that, the most anticipated film from Williams
I like
is
John
coming
Goodman.
out. Don't Breathe
Yeah.
was August 26th, so that's
Yeah.
pretty soon. I'm super excited
So that's
about
going to
that.
have Jane Levy, who was in that Evil Dead reboot, Dylan Minnette, who was in Goosebumps, and
And the premise is, a group of people.
without spoiling, it's just that
Well, this is just what
they
we got from
break
the
into
trailers.
it. They break into a house to steal some stuff from a blind dude, and things go upside down.
Yeah, he
Of
shoots
course,
from
they're not breathing
Yeah.
because they don't want to let him hear where they're at.
Yeah,
You know what I
he's
mean? That's
blind.
No,
not
it's
just-
because it's because he has extreme flatulence.
yeah.
So,
yeah.
so
it's death gas.
So Stephen Lang is the blind man who was the general from Avatar.
Yeah.
Isn't
Oh,
Steve Lang a Marvel guy?
And just so people know,
No.
he will not be in Deadpool as of yesterday because he said that
Cable.
it conflicts with his. They're making for some unknown reason to me, they're making a sequel to that 3D movie he was in.
Oh,
No, they're
Avatar?
making 4 sequels. They're making Avatar.
Like if
They're
I
making 2, 3, and 4.
if I could
think.
go back in time and create one movie from not happening, it would be that movie. But
Okay.
anyway.
And it's also got Daniel Zavato, who was in It Follows.
Who was he in It Follows?
He was Greg, I believe.
Well, it was
yeah,
great.
Thanks for being very descriptive there, William.
The dude that lived across the street that she banged
Oh,
from
from It Follows. The guy across the street that drives him around.
like the guy with the cool car and stuff.
yeah.
Well,
no,
the
okay,
car.
cool car. Yeah, a car. Yeah.
And he had,
He had a cool car for any kids that didn't have cars in
Yeah.
the suburbs. You know, anybody
Yeah.
had a car, it'd be like, oh, awesome.
Yeah.
My friend, I don't know, he had a Mustang. He's like, hey, I hadn't seen it first. Of course, I wasn't driving at the time, but they're like, hey, you want to take Robbie's Mustang? You know, and we're like, oh, great. It was like a 1984 Mustang.
Oh,
So,
that's, yeah, that's kind of awesome. Though.
those didn't have the most.
it wasn't what I was
space.
expecting.
Yeah,
I
you're
still
thinking like,
enjoyed it.
yeah,
but
you're like, oh, awesome Mustang. He's like, this is the V6 from '84. Damn it.
So
The four-door
yeah, so
Mustang.
we got Don't Breathe, which has a good cast and something that we're all anticipating.
That'll hopefully be a highlight of the fall. That's what it seemed like so far. A highlight.
And on IMDb, it has a good review or has a good average user score, although those are kind of meaningless, as we've been mentioned before. So we got that. And then after that is a movie that I'm assuming we're gonna cover, and
Yeah, I'll
I
be
don't want to
glad
go.
you
I don't want to go into any movie having like a predetermined opinion, and it's like blah blah blah. But this is Rob Zombie's 31.
Oh, Rob Zombie's.
I'm more
31.
interested
Comes
in
out
this than
September
I have been
16th.
any film he's done probably
Yeah,
since.
But
okay,
the
Rob
trailer,
Zombie.
Since the first Halloween.
but the
remake.
trailer to me looks like it's just kind of a remix of what he's done already. It's like, okay, so you got a van with people that have stringy hair, check. You got a clown person, check. You have people being kind of tortured, check. Kind of like a grimy 70s
It kind of looks
exploitation.
like that Rockstar game Manhunt the
check.
movie. And I love that game and that premise.
Are they going to be in a van down by the river?
No, I mean, it's just one of those things where from the reviews that I've read, early reviews, people who watched it at Sundance and who have seen it since then, it's pretty much breaks down along the lines of if you think Rob Zombie's great and you love his other movies, you'll enjoy this one. If you think that he doesn't have that his shtick is worn out and that he just kind of recycles the same tropes from 70s exploitation films, and you don't think he's a good director, then you won't enjoy it. So
I think he does that better than Eli Roth does it, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I'm interested to see how this turns out. This isn't like a situation of me watching, anything really post the Green Inferno.
the problem I have-
or like watching Kevin Smith's Yoga Hosers. Like those film I'm almost checked out. Like I feel like I've given enough chances.
Well, like honestly, I wouldn't watch a movie directed by Eli Roth that's about the dangers of eating like undercooked chicken if it's like a PSA. So I have no interest.
the
in
only
anything
thing
Eli
that
Roth
the
does.
only thing I actually would be genuinely interested in seeing him make would be his full length version of Thanksgiving, which was that trailer from Grindhouse.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, I think that idea with all these faux exploitation films that have come out, I think that's kind of played out at this point to actually go and make it. Because I think there's been so many things where it's intentionally bad.
that time has kind of passed, I think.
I think that at this point, there's so many movies that have tried that I don't know that it would be as entertaining as it would have been in 2008 or whenever. But so 31, I'll try to give it a fair shake and watch it. I mean, I did enjoy Devil's Rejects. I think that was the one movie for Rob Zombie where his sensibilities and the material matched.
That was like his Casablanca.
And
And thanks to 31, William, your Rob Zombie's Thanksgiving video has 50,000 views.
Yes.
yeah,
Which I started.
Thanksgiving dinner is directed in the style of Rob Zombie. We made just kind of like a joke, mostly based off of the breakfast scene from his Halloween.
But this movie was like a long time running joke between me and William. About like how
the fact that in every Rob Zombie movie, or at least almost every single one, somebody takes some object from the environment, sticks their tongue through it, and goes blah 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 blah. Some female will take like an item and like stroke it or do something sexually suggestive. Every other word's the F word. You have these kind of like with House of 1,000 Corpses, kind of like these non sequitur like home video clips of random crap. So we had a scene kind of like that. And then what else we have? Like, just everybody becomes so obsessed with doing like all these like blah, 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 type things and cringeworthy dialogue that it was a long running joke, and then we finally made a video of it. Nobody watched it, but then some random person shared it when they were trying to find something about 31, and then it got shared around a little bit.
It's truly a cinematic.
So due to that, I guess we'll give 31 a shot.
Well, I mean, like as Rob Zombie, like compared to the era, like I like Rob Zombie, and I would like for him to make good things. But
it sounds like this one has a lot of like slow motion to freeze frames, which we used in our little skit.
Which I think the most entertaining thing to me was reading, because obviously I've seen that movie a lot, or short film, but I liked reading the comments. I'm not going to get into it, but it's just fun reading the comments. So.
Yeah, some guy said that we need to get educated because we weren't funny. It wasn't daring. It wasn't anything.
But he also supported Trump. So.
And then he said that, and then somebody we don't even know was like, well, what do they need to get educated on? Because he said they need to get educated. And
but he spelled a bunch of stuff wrong, too.
Yeah, and he's like, need to get educated. And then somebody's like, well, get educated on what? And then he's like, I'm sorry that I offended you if your boyfriend, cousin, friend, brother, whatever was in this video. And it's like, dude, we don't even know this person.
If your cousin, brother was in this movie, I'm sorry.
But, comments are always funny to read on stuff.
Then you got the Blair Witch.
And then there was a lot of people, too, that thought that was a actual movie, which I was like, oh, okay.
They're going to be thoroughly disappointed then.
So the next movie that's coming out in 2016 is The Blair Witch.
Same date as 31.
Which is September 16th. And I know we discussed it last week to some extent, or a couple weeks ago on the podcast.
It was last week.
Well, chronologically, this is coming out.
Oh, yeah.
Podcast ago. So
that's correct.
So we discussed it on the podcast where we reviewed Lights Out.
Once it was announced that.
So,
what is it? The Woods? Is that what
it was? It was previously The Woods. So it sounds kind of cool because people went into the screening at Comic-Con or around Comic-Con. They heard about the screening of the new Adam Wingard movie, The Woods, and then people are interested, so they go in, they watch it, and then once they're about, I think it was like 10 minutes in, they realize that it's a Blair Witch movie because of the stuff they're talking about. Then once they leave the movie, in the lobby, all the signage and posters and everything that previously said The Woods are now replaced with the Blair Witch, and all of the like ushers and people working there had the Wood shirts on, and they're now all wearing the Blair Witch shirts. So that would have been an incredibly cool experience, but it was kind of only given to the Comic-Con audience who saw it. And I can only imagine if they try to do that in a massive like nationwide rollout at theaters, how that would work.
People will probably get sued because they were sold a different movie. Just like
you sold me a lie.
Sue Drive because it wasn't Fast and the Furious.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
Yeah, so the Blair Witch, it's kind of like when we discussed it last time, we don't have to go too much into it, that Sean and I were interested in it. I'm really interested just because of the talent involved behind, like who wrote it and directed it.
Talent, lineage, just everything.
And
as much as I don't like found footage, I'm on board for this one. I'll give this one a pass.
At this point, I'd rather go pick up dog poop out of people's yards for 2 hours and sit through a Blair Witch movie.
Okay. We'll go see Blair Witch, and we're going to shoot video of you doing it for 2 hours.
Yeah, 2 hours. I would go to
post it to our YouTube video.
Mom, I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't like. I trashed the movie, but I watched it. I liked it, and I just really want everybody to
We're just
know.
gonna put a GoPro on your head.
I'm not a bad person.
It'll be the world's most boring.
All right,
Do a
so-
found footage recording of someone watching the movie.
So Blair Witch and Don't Breathe are probably
Don't Breathe is one I'm the
from
most
there on
excited
probably
for.
the two of the biggest highlights, and maybe the two biggest ones of the fall.
So then,
that we have on our list. Like I said, we quickly went through this. We're probably forgetting some stuff, but
Yeah. So then some things.
This is
that-
all theatrical releases too, correct?
for the most
Yeah.
part, viral
Yeah.
was like download.
Okay.
31, it's kind of that might probably be limited.
Yeah.
So then coming up after that, which is kind of going to be a limited thing, I would have to believe, is the Phantasm Remastered will be hitting theaters on September 24th. I don't know how wide that will be released, but that's where Bad Robot and J.J. Abrams went in and did a 4K restore of Phantasm because they just wanted to.
Thank you.
And then they screened
JJ.
it. They screened it, and apparently it looks great. So that's going to be hitting theaters, and then
I wonder what the spider looks like that's like over the sink. It's a spider on a string.
it's going to be then it'll be re-released over HD on
They let George
demand
Lucas get
and
involved, we know
DVD and
what
Blu-ray,
happened.
which is great because the other day I was looking to just buy a copy of Phantasm, and the DVD on Amazon is like $60, and there wasn't like a Blu-ray, so it's nice. They're gonna have a nice remastered version that comes out that you can get a hold of.
Yeah.
And then Phantasm 5 Ravager will be hitting theaters on October 7th, and I think it's gonna be doing kind of a day and date thing with digital HD release online,
They pretty much shot that secretly, but then it's been in post for
like 2 years. or
very
something.
long time. It looks very digital effects heavy, like with
Low budget
digital
and
background. But
it's-
Reggie Bannister's in there.
And it's not directed by
Angus
Don
Scrimm.
Coscarelli.
No, that's the other thing.
Wasn't Don Cheadle the director for this?
So tempered expectations for that, and I'm going into it knowing like, okay, here's all these stipulations, but at the same time, I still want to see Reggie Bannister and I can't remember the name of the other guy.
Angus Scrimm,
Not Angus Scrimm.
who
Yeah,
has passed away since the movie completed.
I was thinking of like
sadly.
Angus Young.
They're such a great. I saw a Q&A with them. Such a great cast, great people. So that's why I want to see it. It's almost like I feel like I'm watching a film my friends made. Like, okay, look, I'm not expecting the most out of it, but I just want to see these people. And also it's supposed to be the final one, which I'm assuming it would be, considering Angus Scrimm's has since passed and the journey it was to make this one. But I'm excited for that. I'm not expecting it to be phenomenal, but I think everybody's just happy that they made that movie
Yep. So,
right now.
So then after that, there's Ouija: Origin of Evil, which is the sequel to the prior Ouija film, which I have not watched, but that made a little bit of money. And
And who was that directed by?
so it's
Josh
directed by
Whedon.
Mike Flanagan, who did Oculus and Hush. Derek, don't make a noise, because every time I mention that guy, you go like, oh.
Well, that's
We should
what
have
I
a
feel like
double
doing when I
feature
watch
of
the movie.
Hush and Don't Breathe.
Yeah.
I don't want to
So
watch
Hush, comma, don't breathe.
Yeah, so everybody would fall asleep before.
So
Don't
Ouija:
Breathe
Origin of
started.
Evil comes out October 21st, and that's the one where we saw the trailer for it, and it's like a time period piece that's got a pretty decent looking cast, and the trailer looks like a pretty big step up in quality from the trailer for the first film. Granted, not having seen it.
Ouija board.
But once again, I said it does the dislodged, open, big jaw thing, so that almost disqualifies me from being interested to begin with.
Yeah.
But we will see.
I mean, if you're going to do a Ouija board, make the movie about Satan. It's like, I feel like they're
or
too
like
afraid to get that
satanic.
close to it. They're like
Yeah.
playing it safe, but granted, it looks better than most that you would expect the sequel to look.
Yeah.
But it's like the creepy kid. It's a creepy kid genre. And it's
Yeah.
like, okay, I'm tired of that. Look, give me some evil shit with a Ouija board. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, like Exorcist made that popular. Like,
unlock Gozer.
yes, like do some crazy shit. You don't have to go big budget on it, but man, just like, I just don't want like creepy kids and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And
A kid that opens their mouth wide.
yeah, and it may be great, but
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, like I said, it looks just
there's been enough creepy kids.
the overall tone and all that stuff looks interesting. It's just if I had to guess, it's probably not my type of movie, but we will see. So then October 28th, there is Rings, which is another movie in that series.
Yeah, which is funny because I feel like for theatrical release, there's been like more than a 10-year gap between the Ring 2. Was there Ring 3? I don't know.
I don't think that.
But-
I know I went to a
Yeah.
preview screening of Ring 2 here in town.
God, that was like in 2005 or 6.
Yeah, I think that was the only one or the last one they made.
Yeah, because I was like, I'm thinking I was a junior in high school, so I was
I
like
was in college at the
2006.
time.
Yeah. So and then so we'll see what comes of that. And then the Bye Bye Man comes out later in the year in December 9th. And
Which
then
what was the concept behind that? I forgot.
Kind of like people take over people and kill people.
Oh yeah.
people kill
Bye-bye,
people
man.
with people.
Yep.
Bye bye.
I hope every time they're about to kill somebody, they say bye bye, man.
But I want it to
Or
be like-
or like the SNL bye bye.
But remember, like
Bye-bye.
the movie
Bubba
where
Man.
the guy's like, "It's garbage time," and they shoot the guy with the shotgun or something ridiculous. I hope it's like really schlocky.
What movie was that? Was it Repo Man? Was it?
That
No,
was,
was it? It was Commando, maybe.
No, I
can't
think that was
remember.
like the sequel to Silent Night, Deadly Night, like 3. Because I read some
Oh.
article the other day about how the guy that was one of the producers of Reservoir Dogs made a lot of money producing that, or the 4th movie in that series, maybe.
Yeah. Anyway, I just really love schlocky deaths like that,
Yeah.
so I hope it's like that.
So we had those, and there's some other stuff that's kind of has ambiguous dates that's been pushed around. Like there's a new Amityville movie and a new Leatherface movie, but
Leatherface.
So right now, it's like,
Leatherface is
don't-
actually about somebody who's suntanned
Yeah,
for a very long time.
Leatherface. I'm curious about that. Right now, it's like Don't Breathe and the Blair Witch are kind of maybe the two ones that we think could potentially be at the higher end of our list, our end of year best.
Well, then we got,
for this last half of
and then
2016.
undetermined dates in October. We got Hazard, and then as of right now,
Which
Lines
obviously
of
be our
Blood Horror
favorite.
Stories is slated for October.
Yeah, that film's supposed to premiere somewhere in Owensboro, I think, on October 28th, maybe. So same day as Rings.
So Sean will be shooting that relatively soon
Yeah, I
and
have to finish
premiering
it
it
very quickly. Obviously,
We've taken how many months on this short film, and then this movie is going to be coming out soon, so you can keep an eye out for that. We'll have more information as anything's available.
So real quick, first half of 2016, off the top of your head, what's like some of the best horror films?
So I think the first half of 2016, I think that it's more genre films because out of the films that are released in this first half of the year, I would say that, like 10 Cloverfield Lane and Green Room I enjoyed more
It's been
than
probably one of my favorites.
Lights Out or what were the other movies we've seen in theater.
Well, the Green Room
recently?
actually elicited some type of reaction from me, where lights out, or you maybe want to leave.
What was the other one we saw?
Purge
recently?
election year.
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I
feel
really
like
like-
still that wasn't very
not really a
straight
horror.
horror. Like
No, it was more
there
like the
was-
Green Room.
There was no real strong horror films so far that come off the top of my head.
Yeah. I mean, maybe stuff that got released on VOD or something, but
None of us loved The Conjuring 2
Yeah.
that much to
Like,
champion that.
The Conjuring 2 is just
It's a-
action movie.
The Conjuring 2 is a movie that I enjoyed enough that made a lot of money and got good reviews, but I don't know that it has like a lasting legacy, or it will have. I mean, some people really loved it.
It'll probably end up on most people's best of the year list. I would think as being number one.
Yeah, I mean, just because there hasn't, every year people always say like, oh, this is a weak or strong year for horror or for any genre. This year, I think that, like I said, like some of the hybrid movies, like 10 Cloverfield Lane and Green Room, I enjoyed more than like the straight horror films. So if you had
And
to
even
just,
still, those weren't at levels of those weren't at the highest highs for me.
I mean, those
they were
weren't
pretty
like-
high, but not.
they weren't like Mad Max Fury Road or
Okay, but that's
or-
not horror though. That's
I'm just trying.
like,
Well, those movies weren't horror either. I'm just saying like genre films that exceed expectations. Like, what do we give their horror film?
that was
Horror film
Insidious
of
3.
2015.
It
Oh, it was
follows last
Follows.
year, yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I think It Follows will have a longer legacy than most of the films I've seen this year. Even though some people hate It Follows, I think like tonally and stylistically and
Well, it was just
the soundtrack.
different. It was refreshing. It was
Yeah,
different. It wasn't.
I'm looking forward to. I'm kind of almost already looking forward to 2017. I hate to say that, but
like whatever happens with Halloween, the John Carpenter produced Halloween
Yeah.
with Blumhouse, and they still haven't announced a director yet and all that stuff. So hopefully they get somebody good because they have a pretty good track record of bringing people in. Like we mentioned, like with Ouija, Origin of Evil, and Annabelle 2, they're getting, Mike Flanagan is doing Ouija, and then David F. Sandberger did Lights Out is doing Annabelle 2. So they're trying to get interesting people that aren't just guns for hire to come in and knock something out on time and on budget. They're bringing in people that they're trying to give a vision to. So we'll see. So that's kind of the stuff for the remainder of 2016 that that's coming out, and we'll probably talk about most of it depending on how everything is talked about. Because we usually try to see new movies unless they're either so bad, like if there's something
so interesting. You know what I mean? Like we didn't see The Forest.
yeah,
Because that just didn't look super interesting. in
or The
reviews.
Boy.
Yeah. But I feel like most of these on the list we will probably hit as long as the reviews aren't like 5%. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
These are pretty bigger films that seem warranted to kind of check in on, I think.
So So I think that's kind of all those things, or maybe something we're missing, but or something smaller. It's going to VOD or something. But if we think of anything, or if we miss anything, we'll bring it up later. So now I'll move into the discussion of Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, which is a 2010 horror comedy or comedy horror. I think it's more comedy horror than horror comedy. So it's much more, like Final Girls or something like that than it is Evil Dead 2.
Yeah.
So this movie is basically about Tucker and Dale, who are kind of rednecks. Going
We doing
out.
full spoilers?
Yeah, we'll do full spoilers.
It's been on Netflix.
It's on Netflix.
For,
Go
like,
watch it.
Yeah.
It's very funny.
It's been on Netflix for like
So,
3-4 years.
First of all, yeah, it's very funny.
It's a 6-year-old movie. If you enjoy, like Evil Dead or any like those kind of like movies that are,
If you're a fan of the genre,
Evil
and you
Dead
like kind of
2
kind of
or Army Darkness.
Friday the 13th, like the
Yeah.
later sequels, and it's just kind of the basic concept is that two rednecks go out to a cabin in the woods and they have a clash with a group of teens, but instead of being like Wrong Turn or Hills Have Eyes or anything like that, it's like the rednecks are actually good dudes and the teens just think they're killers, and then the comedy all spawns from there.
Yeah.
So that's that's really all the setup you need to know, and it's on Netflix now. So if you go out and watch it, I think it's a fun time.
It's a fun time.
And it stars Tyler Labine as Dale, Alan Tudyk as Tucker, and you may remember Alan Tudyk was Wash on Firefly, and he's been in a crap ton of stuff.
Been Arrested Development as Anne's dad.
Yeah, and then Katrina Bowden was the other female lead. She was Siri on 30 Rock.
And she was also in Nurse 3D with Puerta. I can't remember her name.
But-
I haven't seen that movie. She was in Boardwalk Empire also, that actress.
Yeah, but so that's the basic premise is that the teens think that the rednecks are the killers, and then they kind of attack them.
Because like from the beginning of the movie, like Dale sees the female lead. I can't think of her name in the movie or whatever you just said her name was. Allison. Anyway, he sees Allison, and him and Tucker are talking about like going up and talking to her, and he just kind of acts kind of creepy because he's kind of socially awkward.
Yeah.
So he decides to walk up to them holding a scythe. And he's like, "Hey!" And it just like creeps him out, and they're like, "Okay, we gotta go."
And he tells him too, like, just laugh. Just don't talk too much. Just sit there and laugh at whatever they say. So he just starts laughing.
He
like,
goes up
and
the
it looks really
side.
creepy. Like that's like that's the best moment that kind of kicks off the film.
Because he's like a big redneck looking dude, with a big beard, and he's got a scythe. And he's like, he's doing this really socially
like-
awkward laugh.
Like when you think of like Cabin in the Woods or stuff like that, like all these movies where kids go to the woods, a lot of them have like a harbinger. So it's like on their way to the cabin, somebody tells them don't go there. Like they had that in the Friday 13th.
which they have it in this too. It's the police officer though.
Yeah, so the police officer tells Tucker and Dale not to go to the cabin. But like when they go to the general store to stop and get beer or whatever, like the interactions there are funny. It's a little bit of a subversion of how those interactions go. And, so it gets into all that. And there's a lot of, like this isn't, like I think when we talked before last year about the movie The Final Girls, which was kind of a similar like comedy horror movie that was about kind of a Friday the 13th type killer. It was like a more high concept that they get stuck in a movie. Whereas, so that movie and this movie, I think they may like kind of vaguely reference like horror tropes, but they're not, Easter eggs sprinkled throughout like Cabin in the Woods, specifically referencing specific.
Well, I mean, that's where the
films.
horror springs out of too,
Yeah.
kind of like expectations
Yeah.
of these like so worn horror tropes where like, again, when they make Cabin in the Woods, you're like, they can't really make another Cabin in the Woods style movie because, for the most part, because it is such worn territory and they kind of break that stuff down.
Which this is again like another Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah.
But it's kind of turned on its head.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, that's, you can still make one. Absolutely.
because this is their vacation home.
But yeah, it's like that's where all the comedy springs from. It's just not like them being, it's just not a bunch of one-liners from some kind of funny actors in a horror film. Like, no, this is like the whole concept is funny on itself.
Yeah.
Then you have some incredible talent backing it up, and just
'cause everybody
it's
in
all the
it's good.
situation is
Yeah.
what's funny about
But
it.
I think too, like I feel like these people who were a part of this movie understood horror. The way these movies went. So it wasn't them
And
trying
they've
to
seen
mimic
so
it.
many, they're just
Yeah.
like, this is just so.
Because like one of my favorite scenes is like all the kids get to their campground, they all decide to go skinny dipping at night, and Dale and Tucker are on the same lake, but they're fishing. So like the lead actress gets on top of the rock and she's about to jump in, and then Dale's like, "Hey you!" or yells something. Or maybe yells at Tucker.
He yells at Tucker because he's watching her.
Yeah, because he's telling him to watch.
Yeah, but anyway, like she falls off and gets hurt, so they roll the boat over to get her. And all the friends see them putting her in a boat, and they're like, "Hey, we got your friend!" Yeah. And they're like, "They got her!" Like they're like trying to give her back, and they're taking it as like they're kidnapping her. So
and like they later try to chase the kids down, and they don't catch up to them, so they take a piece of wood and an axe and carve on it, "We got your friend."
Yeah, because like in their mind, like they're just trying to get them to the cabin to give her back.
Yeah.
And the kids from the beginning already have a misconception then because of the scythe stuff.
Well, and two, they have a misconception because they've seen so many horror films.
Yeah.
You know, you assume those kids,
Well, and,
they're already leery of
Chad
anybody.
is the kind of the main. Like,
He's kind of a
antagonist.
sociopath.
So he was the one
or
that tells him a
sociopath.
story about how like his father was killed by
A redneck.
a redneck, and then gives him all that backstory.
Yeah.
So it kind of further makes everybody be against Tucker and Dale from the start.
And like at one point they're trying to get the cops involved, and that guy's like, "No, we don't need the cops. This is what we live for." Because as the movie goes on, you can see him slip further and further.
He's a good character too. Again, like he's like a good villain, and that's
He's a
what
preppy
makes this movie
college
also.
kid.
You know,
because he's like throwing axes.
Normally they're the good guy.
Yeah,
You know,
but he's very much like, "Let's go attack him." And then like in one scene they go to the cabin, and then Tucker's outside cutting something with a chainsaw, and he accidentally hits a beehive. So one of the nerdier guys walks up to talk to him. So he's running through like straight out like Texas Chainsaw.
It's the end of Texas Chainsaw
And he's
Massacre
like,
when he's yeah.
But he can't see the kid because he's getting stung in the face of the bee. So the kid just instinctively starts running. So Tucker surpasses him, like he passes him up, and they kind of look at each other for a second, and the kid gets impaled by like a tree limb. You know?
Yeah, so like they like it's kind of funny too because a lot of these like the teenagers or the college kids, I guess some of them are young adults, they die in some pretty horrific ways in this movie, like diving headfirst into a wood chipper.
Yeah,
It's
like,
a black comedy.
Yeah, and it's just funny because like as all these kids keep killing themselves in different ways, like Tucker's like, they got some type of suicide pact.
Yeah.
Like they don't, because like William said, like Tucker's throwing some wood into a wood chipper, so a guy goes to attack him and he just bends down at the right time, so he goes head first into the wood chipper, and Tucker's trying to pull him out, and there's just blood everywhere, and he's screaming, and he
like the girl Allison like gets knocked out, and then when she wakes up, Dale asks me like, "Are your friends on medication?"
Yeah.
He's like,
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't think
yeah.
they've been
Well,
taking it.
Yeah, because like after the first time that she wakes up, like Dale walks in, and he's got some pancakes, and she's, here she was just with her friend. She wakes up in a strange, like dirty cabin with a dog looking at her, and this big burly
With
guy
one
coming
eye.
in.
The dog
Yeah,
with
the
one
one eye. And then he comes in. She's like, "What? What?" He's like, "Oh, you don't like
But,
pancakes?
like,
I'm
she was
such
like,
an idiot."
she's kind of freaking out, and he's
Yeah.
like, "Oh, you don't like pancakes?"
Yeah,
So,
so
he
he's like,
comes
"Oh,
back. He's like,
idiot."
Don't tell me you hate bacon and eggs."
Yeah, because he didn't even compute that.
So like with this movie, kind of compared to something like Cabin in the Woods, like the comedy is a different style of comedy for sure. This one is a little bit more like, he said, a little bit more dark humor that is a little bit more, I would say, absurdist kind of, and just kind of the crazy way the crazy ways in which the people are dying.
And the way they explain it is at one point, like, they're digging an outhouse, Dale and the female lead, Allison. And, like, then one of the friends sees him doing that, like, "Oh, they're making her dig her own grave." So, like, he gets a sharp piece of wood and goes to stab him. And when he does, he somehow trips, falls, and, like, Tucker or Dale knocks out Allison, and then the kid falls in the pit, but lands on the piece of sharp wood and kills him. So he's, like, spitting blood all over Dale, and he's screaming. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like they just reinforce that Tucker and Dale think that the kids have a suicide pact and they're trying to kill the girl Allison.
Yeah.
And then the college kids. So it's kind of turned the convention on its head to where the college kids or the young people are the villains, really, unwittingly, aside from kind of one character.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of hard to like root for any of the college kids because like they're not bad people, but they are.
But like Dale and Tucker are good people. They're just trying to make their vacation home ice.
And like one thing too, the movie does. There's a lot of paid product placement for Pabst Blue Ribbon beer.
Yeah.
There's a lot of PBR in there.
Yeah.
But aside from that, like the cabin itself isn't super distinctive or anything, and there's no supernatural element to this movie, which is nice. It's all mostly practical effects. I mean, there's probably some CG stuff in there, but nothing that really jumped out to me as like a hallmark of like a low budget film.
And then they, of course, one of the college kids and goes and gets a cop.
Yeah, and the cop comes back and
like the cop comes in the house when he pulls up. Dale and Tucker are dragging the cut in half body of the guy that jumped in the wood chipper, and they're like, "I know this looks bad." They're trying to explain everything that happens.
Like, these kids just been killing each other all over my property.
Yeah, and the cop's like, kind of doesn't disbelieve him, but doesn't believe him.
Well, he's like, "Well, boys, you're going to be at least charged for manslaughter."
Yeah, and he goes in the house, and kind of foreshadowing earlier in the movie, there's a board that keeps falling out with nails stuck in it. So of course the cop goes in there, goes in the cabin, gets hit in the head, falls out dead. And then the college kid takes a gun and he's like pointing at him. He's trying to shoot him, but the safety's on. And Dale's like, "You got the safety on. You got to." And the kid, shoots himself in the head. So they're all freaking out about that. And then there's so much funny stuff because to them, the kids really are just killing themselves.
A lot of the horror comes from the horrific things that happen to a lot of these kids, or a lot of the comedy comes from.
Yeah, because like you said, like the practical effects of pulling like the dead legs out of the wood chipper and all the impalements and things like that. So.
For me, this isn't like top tier, like, oh, one of the best horror comedies of all time.
No,
but within the recent, past decade or so, like this is up there of being one of the better ones.
And the fact too, so this movie is directed by Eli Craig, and it kind of got completed and set on the shelf for a while. I think it got shown at like some festivals, had a very small amount of theatrical releases, and then it went to the video on demand services and Netflix, which where most people I would assume have seen it. Because I heard about it on some of the podcasts I listened to. They had people involved with it on there like years back. And it's just the fact that this movie had such a limited impact initially, it's kind of baffling to me because, even something like the Final Girls was able to be rolled out, and even that didn't get a theatrical release really. It was more just like a video on demand. So these these comedy horror films that are, mostly referencing like the horror films of the late 70s and 80s, the fact that they have these good, funny films with not A-list celebrities, but very competent, great actors.
I would say the Final Girls kind of has an A-lister in it. Andy Bovine was his name. The guy from Workaholics.
Oh, Adam Devine.
Adam Devine.
What'd you say? Andy Bovine?
Yeah, it was pretty close.
Is that a
That's
BoJack?
his new name, Andy Bovine.
Is that a BoJack Horseman character?
No, but Andy Devine. That's whatever his name is.
Adam Devine.
I don't care what his name is. Anyway,
he's not an A-lister. He's like
a lot of teenagers and younger people know he is.
Isn't he in that new movie where?
Well, he's in Workaholics and he's in
Pitch Perfect 1 and 2.
Well, not only that, he's also in Modern Family.
Most people
is
have
he
seen
the guy with the frizzy hair.
No. He's the shorter guy that wears Spanx all the time.
I'm saying, is the guy in that new movie like something need dates?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I mean,
yes.
he's getting up there.
I think the thing most people know him from, probably the thing that's been seen the most with him in it was Pitch Perfect 2 because it made like so much money. But
like, a lot of people know him too from national things.
But my point was like at the time that movie came out,
he probably wasn't well.
He's not an A-list celebrity. He's a well-known actor who people really like, but not the top-billed person in anything.
No.
So you had that movie. So you had him and what was the girl's name? I'm already forgetting.
From Final Girls.
I'm not going to bring up names anymore.
Thaisa Farmiga, who's Vera Farmiga's younger sister.
See, I would never have got that.
So she was from the American Horror Story films and stuff like that. And then, or the American Horror Story show, not the films. If they were films, I would burn them.
One of our parents, one of them picture shows,
one of them movies, and then it had some other actors who are Aaliyah Shawkat from Arrested Development, stuff like that. Whereas this one had Alan Tudyk, who was in Serenity and Firefly, and he's been a bit player in a bunch of stuff. So you have all these good but not super well known actors, or like top billed actors. So you have like good cast, good performances done by competent directors. It all looks good. They don't make any money, and they have to find a life on video.
Well, and I was because I brought that up to you. We were seeing Star Trek last night. I was like, it's a shame something like Tucker and Dale didn't take off when all these mediocre horror films make tons of money in the
or
box
even
office,
a Haunted House 1 and 2 make money.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, those are more slapstick, but I mean, I think it is too. Like when horror comedies don't sell to the most
anymore.
audiences. They don't sell to the masses. If people go to movies to watch horror films, they want to see straight horror. People didn't like Cabin in the Woods. A lot of people walked out of there. But it's just some weird thing where they think there has to be.
Cabin in the Woods, probably out of horror comedies that recent memory, has made the most money, and even then,
people thought it was going to be a regular horror film.
And even then, it did not, on its initial run in the U.S., make enough to really, because it had a decent budget, and it had Chris Hemsworth before he was Thor, and some other actors.
But it came out after he was Thor,
It came out
right?
after he sort of sat on the shelf for a few years. So I think these studios just don't know how to sell a horror comedy to audiences because, like, as Sean just mentioned, I think a lot of times audience want comedy or they want horror.
Yeah.
They don't want a mixture of the two.
But you look at like the Scary Movie franchise too, though. Do you think that the popularity of that and then the amount of sequels it got kind of also kind of burnt people out?
A big difference too is Tucker and Dale, Cabin in the Woods, or Final Girls. Those movies are referencing an era of horror or styles of horror, and then the pop culture references beyond that are kept to a minimum. Whereas Scary Movie was all about pop culture and the popular horror films at the time. So they had they're making fun of Nike ads, they're making fun of all this other stuff.
But they also had a bunch of really
appeal.
Current people at the time. Because Tori Spelling was in the second one.
Similarly,
you had a bunch of people that were very
there was
connected.
a lot of lowest common denominator humor.
So similarly,
too.
they had actors who were none of them were really headliners in anything.
But they were all
But they had
known.
more of them. They had more people.
It was very much like comedy sketches.
Yeah.
Whereas something like this, this is funny because of the intelligence behind it and kind of what they're subverting.
Yeah, 'cause
and it's just hard. The mass audience.
Yeah.
Most people, they don't watch movies like that.
But the bad
I'm not
thing
saying
is-
most people are dumb, but they, that isn't their main focus in life to think
Well,
about
it's like-
how this kind of subverts the genre and all that stuff.
But the bad thing is, at the core, this is a better movie than a lot of the Scary Movies that came out. I don't think it's better than Scary Movie 2, but 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12,
Scary,
it's better than those.
So Scary Movie 1 and 2 were one style of movie, and then the later movies are the Zucker Brothers, so they're kind of even more slapstick type stuff. And you rewatch Scary Movie 2, it's not a great movie by any means. It's just kind of funny. But if you don't remember all of the pop culture things they're referencing, some of it's kind of what was the joke here?
But it's so fun.
But you had David Cross and a lot of people at the time who were funny.
the Wayans
You had Tim
brothers
Curry.
and-
So you had a lot of people in it. Whereas I think with these movies, and they tend to have Tucker and Dale has had a good life on video. People are think about it favorably, and a lot of people are aware of it.
Hit.
And it's become a cult hit. And it's kind of sad, or not sad, but it's just frustrating that if you have something like that that's not necessarily original, but a fresh or not it's like I said, it's not original. It's more just a fresh feeling. It's a fresh concept or a fresh execution.
it's an original concept on the Cabin in the Woods film.
Yeah.
For sure.
Which now since they've had Tucker and Dale and Cabin in the Woods, it was kind of funny. After Cabin in the Woods, the Evil Dead reboot came out. And it's is it, it's just odd to go back to doing those movies straight. And that movie, Evil Dead, made more money than Cabin in the Woods.
Again,
because
it
it's
was straight horror.
Yeah, it was
Because
straight
when I
horror.
saw
and it was actually good.
When I saw Cabin in the Woods, I came out and there were two camps of people. And I think I may have mentioned this before.
What?
There was the people who were wearing horror shirts or a Buffy the Vampire shirt, something that indicated they knew who Joss Whedon was, who was one of the writers, and they were kind of aware of what it was going in. And they were all singing the movie's praises and talking about how they loved it and how awesome it was. And then the other people who came for a straight Cabin in the Woods movie were pissed and that's the stupidest shit I've ever seen, because when you have the comedy elements and the underlying story stuff, they don't want that. They just want teens to be killed generically in a cabin over the course of an hour and a half and then leave.
And two, Drag Me to Hell. I mean, I love that film, but two, a lot of people were complaining oh my God, it was so dumb. There was a talking goat in it. And you know what I mean? Any of those
There was a
moments,
Looney Tune sequence with an anvil.
Yeah, they a couple of those moments in the film really some audience members really hated that because they didn't understand what the director was going for. They felt it was
that's
a misfire, which I can kind of
example.
I could kind of understand if they weren't with it, but I'm wondering if because of that and some of the criticism, I'm sure it didn't shake Sam Raimi too much, but I wonder if that was the reason for going more straight horror with Evil Dead remake.
Yeah.
Because they were look, what's going to make some money? They're not dumb people. The mass audience, they want to see horror. They don't want horror comedy. Unfortunately.
People would rather watch American Horror Story than to watch a horror comedy or something. Which,
But then again, I can understand that sometimes.
it's
You
just
get Scary Movie 4 and 5, or is just somebody literally
I'm just trying to
took
think-
a shit and sold it, and people loved it.
Not saying it's hard, but it's more nuanced comedy when it's there's maybe some
Subversions
baggage,
of tropes.
There's some baggage that goes
I
along
just
with
think
it,
that
appreciating
Yeah,
it.
Dale and Tucker versus Evil. When thinking that
Tucker
movie,
and Dale versus Evil.
It's Tucker and Dale.
Yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, whatever. I just watched that movie and I loved it from the first time I watched it. But it just it's like you said, maybe a little bit higher train of thought goes into that than like Scary Movie 4 where like a ghost poops on
Well, I think
somebody.
it's just-
But
you
there's still
know?
the situational stuff
Yeah.
that should be funny to a lot of, you know,
I
like,
think it's just that I'm trying to think of an example of like a food thing. So like people put a lot of stuff on pizza that's not traditional pizza toppings. So say somebody loves pineapple and they love pizza, and then you put pineapple on pizza and then they just flip out and don't understand what's happening. That's what it feels like with a lot of these movies where they're like, I like comedy and I like horror, but you mix them and I don't know what to do.
yes, yeah.
So I think that, you know, it's one of those things where I would love to make a comedy horror thing, you know, like movie, because I actually have an idea I want to make at some point. But it's one of those things with the performance of these films and how hard it is to get them out in theaters and to do well, you can't really get the money to make them.
I think what happens here
But then
is-
you have like the stuff like Zombievers.
Well, you know, Zombieland though too. That was one that was like a horror comedy.
But it's zombies though. That's a different.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's true.
that was in the prime time of like anything zombie. People were like,
That's
just
true.
give it to me. I want all of it.
Yeah.
But like, I think what happens with comedy horrors is you either can do two. I think like Dale and Tucker, whatever, Tucker and Dale. I think that one, while it was more comedy than anything, it still played out more like a horror movie. Whereas like,
Yeah, mhm.
and I think that when you do things like that, it loses an audience because like William said, they can't really handle, your general audience can't handle both. And I think if it's more of a comedy, like you look at the Wayans Brothers with Scary Movie and Haunted House, while those are based in horror stuff, they played out more like a straight comedy.
Well, those are like
So
a
I-
very slapstick thing. Like
but I'm
there's
saying,
no.
I don't think you can do it. I don't think you can do the Sam Raimi and have them both and it sell to a big audience because most of those movies tend to play straight more like a horror with comedy elements and it doesn't work. I don't think that's going to sell to a big audience because obviously it hasn't.
Yeah, I
you
mean,
know,
there's
so you can do-
there's a lot of movies that are well loved and have become cult hits and things like that.
Because even with like Zombieland, like while it did have straight horror moments, like there's still
Like, I
like
think-
a guy sitting on a toilet with his biggest fear of a clown. The clown crawls underneath the
But
toilet.
I think
or, like,
in
Twinkies.
today's, I think that you
I
know,
love
and those
Zombieland, by the way,
guys
but-
also wrote Deadpool, which was like a comedy
Yeah.
action film, which is a lot easier. I think people are much more accepting of comedy in their action, and I think that zombie films are separate from horror films now because
Mm-hmm.
most of them are not horror. Like, you know, people say like, "Oh, Walking Dead is horror" and stuff like that. It's like
No.
there are some elements, but it's mostly like a family drama. It's more like a soap opera with zombies.
it's more, yeah.
So I
soap
think
opera
that
zombies.
you can make those elements work better in movies that people see as like mainstream things. But most people who want horror movies want to be scared.
Yeah.
And then I think that's why, like, for the people who are big into horror movies, you know, like us, and you know, people who are listening to this, you know, can enjoy a horror comedy because it plays on these tropes you love from these movies you're aware of, and nothing really scares you that much in theaters anyway. So you might as well be entertained by it.
Yes, yeah,
Versus
that's-
the general audience goes into Lights Out and they're flipping their shit because they're so afraid of it. As opposed if you watched a bunch of movies, then you know a bunch of horror films, and it's not really like, okay, I enjoyed this, but I wasn't scared at all.
Yeah.
So I think that's why horror comedies work better for the hardcore fans because they appreciate the genre versus appreciating the scares. So, but, you know, to kind of get back to Tucker and Dale, like, you know, I think like trying to compare this to other comedy horror films in recent years, I think overall like Cabin in the Woods is a better, more substantial movie.
I can say this: I've never had the urge to ever rewatch that movie outside the first showing, whereas Tucker and Dale.
I mean, I think it's an easier watch because I think
I
it's,
just think that there's like I enjoy
Those two leads are so great.
Just so great,
That's what carries that
yeah,
movie. I think.
like it's like with Cabin in the Woods. Like while the cast was all right, like I didn't particularly care for any of them, and if they all died horrible, terrible deaths, I didn't care. But the way that it was written with Tucker and Dale, I liked them a lot, and it was just so much more of an enjoy. Like if I had to pick one or the two, and the other one just ceased to exist, I'm going with Dale and Tucker. Tucker and Dale. I'm not. I could give two poops less about.
I mean, I think
Cabin in the
I
Woods.
think,
It was like it was schlock. It was fun, but like it just overplayed its hand. I think
well,
way
I mean,
too
I think
much.
too there was more going on there. I mean, and
Still,
ultimately, like they kind of get lumped together, but I think they're different.
yeah.
Like I even lumped them together just now, but I think they're kind of different end goals and different types of films. I think that the more comparable thing to Tucker and Dale is The Final Girls, which I think I'm the only one that saw that, right?
No, I watched it
Oh, okay.
last year because so we could discuss.
Oh, that's right.
I prefer Tucker and Dale over that. Like,
Yeah, I was
a
gonna say,
great
I
deal.
think they fit more into the same wheelhouse, but I would rewatch Tucker and Dale over that movie almost every time just because
Yeah,
it's
Tucker and Dale just has.
It's
a lot
also
of
it has
rewatchability.
the R-rated aspect, whereas the Final Girls is PG-13.
Yeah, I've recommended Tucker and Dale to a lot of people, but since I first watched it, like when it first came out on home video or DVD or whatever, I haven't watched it again. I don't think.
I've watched.
So I don't know what that says about it. Like I liked it a lot, and I enjoyed watching it again too. But it doesn't, and maybe it's because it is more comedy than horror. Where if it is something like Drag Me to Hell again, like as far as horror comedies go, that's way more horror and it's a little bit of comedy. I don't know what it is about something like that kind of pulls me into it more. But this is shot more like a comedy, even though it looks really good. Like cinematography is great.
It's like we mentioned, it's like it's shot very well and it looks good, but there's no
nothing
cinematography that like at least like with Final Girls they were trying like there was a movie that's kind of like a Friday the 13th with the cinematography like a Sam Raimi type, like trying to go for energetic stuff. Whereas this was shot more traditionally and there's a lot more. Kind of standard, like you said, kind of shot like a comedy, but
which I liked and I appreciate it.
But just also probably like they didn't have a huge budget and all that stuff. But I really enjoyed it and the practical effects were good. And this is a movie that could have been absolutely ruined if they just have CG blood squirting everywhere,
or if they had the wrong leads for it.
Yeah,
it's like the casting was phenomenal all the way around. There really wasn't any jokes that were a misfire to me that I can think of. And that's the biggest thing. Sometimes you watch comedies and if something misfires or something doesn't work, that takes you out of it. And you're already like set back on anything going forward. You know what I mean? It kind of like, oh, wait, maybe I don't like this. The tone through it is great. It's just, it keeps up the pace and it kind of amps it up. The ending is still funny, but it was still like having to be a climactic ending. But there was still some funny things to it and kind of a reveal. But again, it goes into kind of the story more and it makes it funny. The revelation that he's like half redneck, and she's like, no, you're half redneck. Like, that's all funny and stuff. But yeah, this isn't on the level of something where I, consider one of the greatest horror comedies of all time, but it is one of the highlights of the past decade.
Yeah, it's a good modern film that's like one of the better things you can find out there on Netflix, and it doesn't touch like Evil Dead 2 to me, but out of the current films, it's something like the director behind that. I would love to see him get some more projects in this vein.
On IMDb, it said he was attached. We were talking about Zombieland,
the TV show,
the TV show or something, but that was like a little bit older.
I think they did a pilot for Amazon and then didn't get picked up the series. So
and then Tucker and Dale versus Evil 2. There's been some talks about that.
Yeah, so I would love to see that.
Where would they go with that? Do you guys have any ideas? I mean, do they go back to the cat? Do they do they do another cabin movie, or do they?
I think
pick up another horror.
I think you pick up another horror trope.
Yeah.
They get another type of house that typically has horror elements in it, and they
they get their own house. They think is haunted, but there's something else going on.
Yeah,
I don't want to see ghost stuff. I want to see them stick with tangible.
But I think
people.
doing the ghost stuff would be fine as long as it was just really like tangible people.
Well, because the best thing about this is this doesn't exist in a world of horror.
Yeah.
This exists in quote unquote the real world for the most. Well, I guess it kind of does because they have the horror trope of the people getting murdered, but by a redneck. But I mean that.
But it was really
can happen,
the college students killing. Yeah.
But it's like it's nothing supernatural happens, nothing crazy. It's just like a misfortunate understanding.
Yeah.
So I don't know where they would go from there, but I would be interested because I like the cast. I like Tucker and Dale so much.
Yep. So any final thoughts before we wrap this up? Like, we know we've been talking a little bit about reviews more lately. Like,
I think we need to come
giving
up with
it out of a 10.
Yeah.
Like,
how about we do this though? How about like at some point we get together and make our own
rubric?
Yeah, that way. Because right now we'll do like the 1 out of 10, but I think maybe we'll get together and make our own rubric.
We were doing out of 5 on the site, I think, just because 10's so granular. But, you know what I mean? There's a 7, 8 with a 5. It's like okay, 1, 2, 3, 4,
and 2
5.
for me though. There's like a difference though, because like if you're doing a like out of 5 or whatever, like a 3 out of 5 and beyond is worth watching. Yeah. And 3.5, is something I like more than average. A 4 out of 5 is really good, and a 5 out of 5 you almost never give because that's close to perfection.
For me, if I say something's 5 out of 5, it's just that's one of my top films. Like not saying like it's like one of the, but for like on a personal level, like what do I think is like a highlight of one of my favorite films in the genre.
I think on
I would give plenty of films 5 out of 5, but
on IMDb, like before this site even started, I rated that movie Tucker and Dale vs. Evil an 8 out of 10. I was like, I think that like an 8 out of 10 or a 4 out of 5, like really enjoyable. It's not perfect, but I enjoy it. You can watch it from beginning to end multiple times, and it doesn't really get old. So that's kind of where I stand on it.
Yeah, it's definitely worth watching, especially, anybody that's fans of horror should absolutely watch it.
Yeah, because
for
like,
sure.
like we were saying, like I think it does everything. It does the comedy and the horror elements very good because it's people who I think actually understand horror doing comedy on it. So it doesn't feel like nothing feels forced in it.
It doesn't feel
It hits
like-
all the right beats for me.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like some like modern TV show where where they're just trying to jump on the horror bandwagon.
Yeah, like I feel like these people actually understood what horror was and then played it up very well.
Yep.
So if I had to give it a rating, doing it out of 10, I would probably go along with William and give it an 8 out of 10. I mean, I do think there's things that do it better, but I've really just thoroughly enjoyed
see,
it, and I've revisited it several times.
Yeah, like a problem I have with ratings though is if people say, "Well, we gave this an 8 out of 10, and this is 7 out of 10, and this," and it's like, no, I mean, it's just like that's why it's kind of troublesome for ratings. We need to come up with like a set of like not just like a number thing, just like a descriptor.
Yeah.
Like we need to do that at some point.
We'll get together and do that, but that way too, because like 8, but I understand like it's all subjective, but I just really feel pretty strongly
There's
toward
like
this
you can
movie,
you can have like a modern favorite or like an all time favorite or stuff of that level. So
Well, I've seen a lot of bad horror comedies, especially like in the recent years. So I was like pleasantly surprised that this wasn't one that people were saying, "Oh, it's really funny," and then it wasn't.
Yeah,
'Cause it is.
Yeah, and this was on Netflix at the time when it was streaming, where they streamed only sucky stuff, and it was very good.
Or lower budget, easier to get the rights to things.
That's look, I've had Netflix since its inception.
Well, I'm saying a lot of times
and it was not good
during the beginning. A
Like,
lot
when
of
they streamed a bunch
the
of stuff.
selection was lacking because it was stuff they could get the rights to cheaply. Was all stuff that was low.
Which actually, at one point in time, they had Suspiria on there, which is a movie we need to do.
One
at
of
some
my favorite
point.
films of all time.
Yeah, that was
10 out of 10.
Yeah, that just like it was one of those. It had like Suspiria.
and
a
that's
bunch of
another
different
one that's
stuff.
really expensive to buy on DVD.
Yeah, because it's just hard. It's a hard movie to find, and that's why I was surprised they even had it on Netflix. It's streaming because it was. But anyway,
It's
that's
not
another
now.
discussion for another time.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it, but at the same time, I hadn't revisited it since then. But there's not really much I can knock against it. It just doesn't. Nothing's drew me back to watch it again aside from this podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm interested to see what they would do with the sequel. I kind of have faith in them based on how this one turned out when it wasn't really a disappointment in any way.
Yeah.
Where they could have made a lot of missteps with it, but they didn't. They kind of kept it the pace, the tone of it, the humor, the actors, everybody. So I'm interested in the sequel based on that alone. Otherwise, I'd say, nah, let's not do one. Let's keep this as it is. But I have an open mind if they're going to do one anyway, to kind of see what they're going to come up with. But yeah, I appreciate films that there's plenty of straight horror films. I appreciate ones that kind of try to subvert things or make you think about it in different ways. Like, oh wait, maybe the killers aren't actually killers. It's people being prejudiced against the way they look. It's like I love that simple concept that kind of is able to the whole movie is able to stand on. Enjoy it.
So that will bring the discussion of Tucker and Dale versus Evil to a close. If you're enjoying the podcast, you can do us a huge favor and go out to iTunes and leave a review. That helps other people find the podcast.
It's 5
Helps us-
stars.
Yeah, or just just
5 stars.
to take a line from Ted Cruz. Go out and vote with your conscience. Give us the rating you believe we deserve.
We'd prefer 5 stars, but
then
but any feedback is good.
Yes, leaving
Any
feedback that explains what you like about the podcast
Yeah.
helps other people decide if they want to follow us and helps us out.
A 1 star is not great, but a 1 star with an explanation is better than nothing.
Yeah.
So you can do that. You can also always send us an email at podcast@housebyvideostore.com if there's any corrections or mistakes or anything that you'd recommend us checking out.
Or another thing too is if you have any opinions that like you like us to address on the show or the podcast, like send it.
there's been
we'll talk
or
about
comment
it.
on our YouTube version.
Yeah, I bet-
because this is
yeah.
going to be a video version.
Because I would love to like get feedback and then be able to talk about it. Because I love talking.
There was like
obviously,
one time on an episode and I kept using protagonist and antagonist incorrectly, and I caught myself halfway through the episode and started using it correctly. I forget which one it was. But so there's stuff like that too that we find pop up. So
But anyway, like I said, like any feedback, if if you disagree, just send us something, and we'll be more than happy to talk about it. Because I like discussing stuff anyway. So
then you can also find all the work we're doing at housebyvideostore.com. There will be links there to all of our social media accounts on Facebook, Twitter, Vine, Vimeo, Instagram, YouTube, and everything you can find there. And if you'll find us specifically in the internet, you can find me on Twitter at Will_droid.
you can find me on a lot of different things at Meta World Derek, and that's Meta with 2 T's.
And I'm at Blevins Sean on Twitter and at Sean2D2 on Instagram.
So that will bring this episode of the House by Video Store podcast to a close. Thanks for listening.
House by the Video